on note. This report contains details of sexual assault and violence. Hamas militants and their allies raped, assaulted and sexually tortured their victims during and after the October 7, 2023 terror attack on southern Israel to maximize pain and suffering. A landmark new report has concluded.
And a Russian cargo ship likely carrying 2 nuclear reactors for submarines, possibly destined for North Korea, suffered a series of explosions and sank in unexplained circumstances about 60 miles off the coast of Spain, and a CNN investigation has found. The extraordinary fate of the Ursa Major has been shrouded in secrecy since it sank on December 23, 2024. But it may mark a rare and high-stakes intervention by a Western military to prevent Russia from sending an upgrade in nuclear technology to a key ally, North Korea, CNN reporting suggests. And the ship set sail just 2 months after Kim Jong-un had sent troops to assist with Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. And a Bolivian judge has found former President Evo Morales in contempt of court and reissued a warrant for his arrest after he failed to turn up for the start of his trial on charges of trafficking a minor. The ruling on Monday renewed tensions in the South American country, with supporters of Morales warning they would throw the country into turmoil if the former leader is arrested.
The former mayor of a wealthy suburb in the United States city of Los Angeles has admitted to acting as an illegal agent of China, according to authorities. Eileen Wang, the former mayor of Arcadia, agreed to plead guilty to 1 count of acting as an illegal agent of a foreign government from late 2020 until 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice said on Monday.
And Pakistan has assured the International Monetary Fund that it will strengthen interagency data sharing and tighten oversight of trade-based transactions after an inquiry found that nearly Rs. and 70 billion may have been laundered through over-invoiced solar panel imports. And Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has set up a supervisory committee to monitor disciplinary action against officials accused of failing to detect and stop the alleged scheme, according to a government notification. And the International Monetary Fund has asked Pakistan to strengthen anti-money laundering controls in the real estate sector, improve beneficial ownership disclosures, and step up efforts to detect trade-based money laundering as part of its latest review of the country's reform program. The push came as the IMF approved the release of the next $1.1 billion tranche for Pakistan under the Extended Fund Facility. And Quetta. The Balochistan Assembly on Monday adopted 2 resolutions on reducing taxes on women's hygiene and sanitary products and to strengthen minority representation at provincial and local levels. The resolution, jointly moved by JUEF female members Ms. Shahida Rauf Ume Kulsum, Rehman Balok and Kaya Balok, demanded the federal government to reduce taxes on women's health and hygiene products, which are available at high prices. And the last 2 evacuation planes carrying passengers and crew from the cruise ship hit by a deadly hantavirus outbreak have landed in the Netherlands. As a repatriated used passenger tested positive for the respiratory infection, the 2 planes carried 28 evacuees from the MV Hondius, which had been docked in the Canary Islands, including 6 passengers and 19 crew members, the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on Monday.
That something is notably common in the politics of Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, Narendra Modi, Nawaz Sharif, Imran Khan, Sheikh Hasina, and even Asif Zardari. Several others qualify naturally that. But this little sample explains the way democracy has turned into a zero-sum game between political leaders at the expense of the masses. In other words, that all the eminences listed above are either riding the tiger of power or rode one to face its fateful consequences. A zero-sum game is a competitive situation in game theory where one participant's gain is exactly balanced by another's loss, that meaning the total benefits and losses sum to zero. The total amount of resources is fixed, so one player can only win at the expense of another. The masses can only stare in disbelief. That Abraham Lincoln and Immanuel Kant would be horrified by the hollowing out of democracy into a fossil of itself. All the above leaders would likely be in jail should they get off the tiger's back, assuming they are not already there or living in exile. That the fear of reprisal grips Trump and Netanyahu most starkly. They may be the most powerful men today, going about wrecking the world at will and threatening Armageddon. Trump faces impeachment the moment he leaves office, that having reveled in the fear and anguish of his foes during his stay at the helm, the revenge could come earlier in November should the midterm polls give Democrats a majority in both houses. That. With no end in sight to the conflict in the Middle East, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on Monday ordered that a countrywide austerity drive be extended until June 13. Meanwhile, with rumours of a possible 28th constitutional amendment swirling, the Premier and his team also met with President Asif Ali Zardari and his aides on Monday, even as both houses of Parliament were in session. That Islamabad. Dr. Uzma Khan, the sister of ex-Premier Imran Khan, on Monday challenged before the Supreme Court the Islamabad High Court ruling to refuse to shift him to Shifa International Hospital, allow access to his personal physicians, family and counsel, and provide medical details to the family, filed through senior counsel Uzar Karamat Bandari. The petition explained the applicant was not a party to the proceedings before the IHC, but was aggrieved by the impugned judgment. In this regard, that it referred to the SC decision in H.M. Sayers' case that allowed a person adversely affected by a decree or order to challenge the same before SC. That. A UK Prime Minister using the idea of getting closer to the European Union as a political life vest to get the British public on his side. That is certainly not something we in the EU would have predicted. That, especially when you think it's the 10-year anniversary of the Brexit vote next month. This was the response of an EU contact of mine here in Brussels. He asked to remain anonymous to be able to speak freely. That we were discussing the highly anticipated speech given by Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer following the massive slap in the face he got from voters last week in local elections. He launched a bid this morning to save his political life. That. Security around Beijing's historic Tiananmen Square has been heightened for days, with rumours on social media swirling of a special parade or some big choreographed event. Preparations for this major event have started with a whisper, but China appears ready to put on a show for US President Donald Trump.
And just 2 months after listing its first venture fund on the stock market, Robinhood is preparing to launch a second. The company has filed a confidential registration for RVII and a standard regulatory step that allows it to work through the approval process before making details public, unlike its first fund, which currently holds stakes in 10 late-stage companies: Airwallex, Boom, Databricks, 11 Labs, Mercor, and OpenAI, Ara, Ramp, Revolut, and Stripe. RVII will cast a wider net, investing in growth stage and early stage startup. It's a meaningful distinction, and given that early stage startups are younger and carry more risk, but also offer the potential for greater returns. And Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer is fighting to keep his job after his appeal for a reset, following disastrous results in last week's local elections, was met with scores of lawmakers in his governing Labour Party calling for him to quit. And in a speech to the Labour faithful in London, Starmer said he took responsibility for the heavy losses in councils across England and in elections for the Welsh and Scottish parliaments. But he vowed to stay in his job, and saying a change in leadership would plunge Britain into the chaos that flourished under the Conservative Party, which ousted 2 leaders in the 2 years before Starmer took office. And General Motors has laid off more than 10% of its IT department, or about 600 salaried employees, in a deliberate skills swap, clearing out workers whose expertise no longer fits and making room for some with AI-focused backgrounds. GM confirmed to TechCrunch that it had conducted layoffs. They were first reported by Bloomberg News. And South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he will legally challenge a report that has paved the way for Parliament to consider impeachment proceedings against him over the theft of large sums of cash from his private farm. A Constitution Court ruling last week found that Parliament acted unconstitutionally when it voted against establishing an impeachment inquiry against Ramaphosa regarding the Fala Fala report in 2022. And Hundreds of Hamas militants accused of committing war crimes during their October 2023 attack could face the death penalty after Israel late Monday approved the creation of a special military tribunal to prosecute their cases. The legislation received broad backing from both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's governing coalition and much of the opposition, passing with 93 votes in favour and 0 against. And a new wave of gang violence in Haiti's capital has displaced hundreds of people and caused the aid group Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, to suspend work in local hospitals. The group, also known as Doctors Without Borders, said on Monday that about 800 residents had sought refuge from fighting inside its hospital in the Site Soleil neighborhood of Port-au-Prince before operations were suspended. And at long last, Android and iPhone users will be able to send each other end-to-end encrypted text messages. On Monday, and end-to-end encrypted messaging is starting to roll out in beta for conversations between iPhone and Android users running the most up-to-date software. And end-to-end encrypted E2E messaging is an important privacy feature that makes users far less susceptible to surveillance by hackers, governments, or the companies that make these communication platforms. And when these messages are sent between devices, they're encrypted while in transit, making it near impossible for anyone else to intercept and read the message. But until now, messages sent between iPhone and Android devices could not be end-to-end encrypted E2EE, even though iMessage has been encrypted since its launch in 2011, and Android users have been able to communicate among themselves via E2E since 2021. And Spanish teenage superstar Lamine Yamal has garnered praise from football fans for expressing solidarity with Palestine. During Barcelona's celebrations for winning the La Liga title, in several clips widely shared online Monday, the 18-year-old could be seen waving a Palestinian flag from inside an open-top bus to cheers from jubilant crowds. And the European Union and United Kingdom have imposed sanctions on Russian institutions and officials accused of systematically deporting and indoctrinating Ukrainian children. The EU announced measures against 23 state institutions and individuals on Monday. Britain simultaneously unveiled a broader package targeting 84 people and entities, roughly a third of them linked to what was described as Russia's campaign to forcibly deport and militarize Ukrainian children. And United States President Donald Trump said he will cut the 18-cent federal tax on petrol to offset surging prices that have continued to soar after his comments that the US ceasefire with Iran is on life support. On Monday, Trump said he would suspend the petrol tax, but did not specify an end date. And the European Union has agreed to impose sanctions on Israeli settlers and leading Hamas figures. Consensus was reached on the sanctions packages at a meeting of member states' foreign ministers on Monday. The measures targeting Israeli settlers over violence against Palestinians in the West Bank were long awaited, having been blocked by the self-styled illiberal government of Hungary's former Premier Viktor Orban. And Donald Trump says he will raise the issue of US arms sales to Taiwan during his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week. Trump reiterated his belief that a conflict with China over the status of Taiwan was unlikely in the near future. And South Africa's parliament is set to establish an impeachment committee to probe allegations against President Cyril Ramaphosa in the Farmgate scandal. The lower house of parliament said on Monday that its speaker will set up the body to investigate. The move was ordered by the country's highest court last week as it revived impeachment proceedings against Ramaphosa. And scientists are warning of an increased risk of collisions between whales and ships off South Africa's southwestern coast, caused by changing shipping routes due to conflicts in the Middle East. The rerouting of ships around South Africa since 2023, when Houthi rebels hijacked a British-owned vessel near Yemen, has substantially increased the chances of vessels striking the mammals in the region, they say.
that. Medics had to restrain Palestinian journalist Ali al-Samoudi while tending to his bullet wound when the body of his colleague Shireen Abu Akleh arrived at Ibn Sina Hospital in the occupied West Bank. I managed to look and see Shireen lying next to me. I couldn't believe the situation. I started screaming and I tried to get to her. They didn't let me, said al-Samoudi as he recounted to Al Jazeera the events of May 11, 2022.